I'm Joanna Simpson here at RiskMinds Insurance in Barcelona. Joining me now is Hannah Simons, Head of Sustainability Strategy at Schroders, and Wojciech Hershel, Head of Insurance Advisory EMEA, also at Schroders. Thank you both very much for joining me. And Hannah, if I could just come to you first, just tell me a bit about how you're finding the conference so far.
Well, actually, I'm really energised to be here because it's the first in-person event that I've been at since COVID, and you get that feedback through Zoom. As you know, you can't see the reaction to what you're talking about. So today, earlier when we were speaking, to see people nodding their head, to see people actually being able to put their hand up and ask a question is tremendous for me.
It's a very different experience, isn't it? And what are you most looking forward to?
So actually, it's hearing about other people's experiences. So today is the focus on the things that matter most to me, which is around sustainability. So really hearing about how companies, organisations are approaching their own sustainability journey.
And Wojciech, how have you been finding the conference so far?
Fantastic. It's such a difference. I was here last year in Barcelona in a different hotel, admittedly. Unfortunately, the conference started when Omicron struck. Not a lot of people have come. Those who have come, unfortunately, had to wear masks. It's a completely different experience. It's so good to be back in a sort of old normal, as we were just joking.
And what are you most looking forward to?
For me, those conferences are really about connecting with people and meeting new people and networking. So that's a great opportunity, and that's why we're here.
And Hannah, if I can just ask you as well, how will the energy crisis impact the journey to net zero?
Thank you for asking about that. I think you actually need to break it down into two areas. Firstly, what's actually happening right now, and then what might be the longer term consequences. I think it's fair to say currently in the short term, the focus is on how are we going to actually get access to sufficient energy to keep us all warm this winter. So inevitably, the focus on long-term decarbonisation plans is sort of forgotten in the very short term. In the long term, I do actually think the ongoing crisis in Ukraine and what we're seeing in energy prices may actually may accelerate the journey to net zero as countries really focus on how they can ensure that they can deliver consistent energy into their entire country. And so therefore looking at things like renewable energy sources, in my view, will become a more important feature.
And what expectations do you have of companies?
I think we're really clear with what we ask of companies, and we have four objectives. The first one is to get them to commit to a decarbonisation pathway that's consistent with a net zero journey in 2050. But that's simply a pledge, if you like. That's an ambition. And we always know that we maybe don't always deliver on our goals without setting very clear targets. So action 2 is to set a clear target, both over the short, medium and long term, around scope 1 and scope 2 and those relevant scope 3 emissions. Part 3 though, again, you've now committed, you've made your pledge, you've got your plan, your sort of targets. We want the actual detail. So publish a detailed transition plan that sets out the actions as a company that you're actually taking to deliver net zero. And the fourth piece, unsurprisingly, is report back. You told us about the actions you're taking, so how are you actually delivering against those ambitions?
And Wojciech, what actions are European insurers taking?
Right, so this is a very good question. And we actually did a study recently in looking at, we were talking earlier today about net zero, and we wanted to understand what insurers are doing to get to net zero. And I'd say the results are quite positive in that there are countries which are clear leaders, like the UK, like France. There are countries which are catching up and maybe late bloomers. My experience is that the bigger the insurer, the more serious they are about the climate change, and rightly so, because they have vast resources and they have also huge investments. As we were talking before, Hannah just mentioned scopes of emissions. Insurers are financing a lot of emissions through their investment portfolio. So they started that journey to decarbonize and have set the medium-term targets to, let's say, reduce emissions by 20-30% by 2030. The big issue for insurers, though, is the fact that they are holders of sovereign debt. Probably about, I'd say, half of the balance sheet is in sovereign debt. Obviously, that's a completely different story. Engaging with companies, as Hannah just said, is completely different to engaging with governments, and I think that's where the attention will be going forward.
Hannah Simons, Wojciech Hershel, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.